Action on BBC Radio Manchester. Where are you? Just after 10 to 9. Got music from Fleetwood Mac to finish. But first, well, it's a great story, and I'm going to play you this because it's a fantastic bit of music, but there's a connection to this that's... Hang on, just let this play because it gives me goosebumps. Yeah, well spotted. It's the Dambusters theme, and a team of scuba divers are on a mission to raise World War II highball bouncing bombs from a loch. They weren't used in the Dambusters raid, but the footage of them being tested was used in the film. So there is a Dambusters connection. Mark Paisey from Macclesfield is part of the British Sub-Aqua Club. He's leading the team, and he's sitting opposite me. Good morning.
Good morning.
You're also a former pilot, I understand.
I'm an ex-RAF fast jet pilot, yes.
So let's explain the connection, because when you say Dambusters, you think bouncing bombs, you think Lady Derwent reservoirs and stuff. It's similar but not the same, this story.
That's correct. The technology was the same. They were both developed by Barnes-Wallis. Upkeep, which is the bouncing bomb that everyone knows about, was used against the dams and were used operationally and successfully. Highball was the naval version and was really aimed at sinking large capital ships, namely the Tirpitz. It wasn't used in anger, so it's less a known story. But the technology was exactly the same. They bounced off the wall, due to be dropped from the Mosquito aircraft by 618 Squadron as opposed to 617 Squadron. And these weapons, although they weren't actually used, they were deployed ready for use. Right,
and they were tested on a loch in Scotland, and that footage is used in the film. And you're going to sort of raise them from the bottom, is that the plan?
So that's correct. So there are over 200 or so were tested in Loch Striven, and they were tested against two ships, basically the Malaya and the Corvette, which were old French and Royal Navy battleships, yes? And they lie at the bottom of the loch, and it was Dr. Ian Murray who basically started the idea of the project, because he's chairman of the Barnes-Wallis Foundation. He knew these things existed, but there were none in any museums. And
presumably because when you test them, they sank.
Correct. So the testing was all about checking the casing on the rounds and whether they would actually survive impact, and could it be done operationally. The Royal Navy obviously collected quite a few back to see what the casing was working, and they worked on modifications to the design. Right. But the Barnes-Wallis collection doesn't actually have an example of one.
So you're going to retrieve one, we hope?
That's the aim of the mission.
How big are they, Mark?
So they weigh 600 kilos.
That's pretty big.
It is, yeah, and they're about a metre across.
And how are you going to do it? I mean, I say sub-aqua. When I think of that, I think of, guys in little masks and a single tank and having a bit of a potter around an old wreck. It's a bit more sophisticated than that.
It's a very much a combined project. So we're the sort of volunteer element, and we put the project together, and we're doing much of the survey work. We've got the Royal Navy dive team from Faslane coming down, which are helping with because they are ordnance, so they've got to be certified, and they're actually responsible for the lift element of the exercise. Mm-hmm. We've also got 3 commercial companies that are inputting some very expensive assets to the project, because we don't really know what's at the bottom of the loch. So we're really interested in finding what else is there, because...
Is it clear? What's the water like? Can you see?
The sites basically vary from 35 to 55 metres. It's dark and silty. Oh. It's a problem if you get to the bottom and you kick up all the silt, which is one of the reasons we were training in Salford Quays, which is very actually similar conditions, ironically.
Nice. What sort of state will they be in? I mean, they've been there a long time.
So they've been there about 70 years. The actual munition basically is a small cylinder which is actually filled with piano glue, because that replicated the explosive at the time.
I love stories like that.
Yeah, and then it's put in a steel case, so it looks a bit like a giant conker in shape with flattened sides, and the flattened sides were designed to connect a device that gave the weapon backspin to keep it skipping on the water.
So are they going to be winched out, or are you going to put like inflatables underneath and lift them up? How are you going to get them out?
What the Navy are going to do is they're going to put a small piece of scaffolding, basically a square around the bottom of the bomb below the halfway point, and they're going to run strops over the top into a link at the top, and that will either be connected to a crane or a large lift bag, which will lift the thing to the surface. Once the thing's at the surface, it'll actually be put into a container, and we're going to start like a 15-month restoration project.
How many do you want to lift?
So we got permission from Marine Scotland to lift 2.
Oh, just a couple, right?
Yes.
And when? That's the next question. Because I want to see, I'm sure there'll be footage and video. I want to see this.
So it's going to be done in mid-July.
Terrific. Well, I know there's footage of your exploratory sort of mission underwater to have a little look. I think that's on our Facebook page at the minute. Have you done some shooting down there and having a look and see what you can expect?
So there's quite a bit of footage knocking around on the internet and Facebook and stuff, and there'll be some more coverage on the actual week itself. And we're hoping to get a lot of the side scan imagery out, which will give you a very accurate picture of what's at the bottom of the loch itself, which could be really interesting.
Fabulous. Well, it's really nice to talk to you. I could talk for an awful lot longer, but we must make way for Mr. Trow and his music and his special guests after 9, who are, would you believe, the Jacksons. Thank you, Mark. Mark Paisey from Macclesfield, who's raising the highballs from the bottom of a Scottish loch.